One of the greatest negative impacts of globalization is global environmental problem. Um, why globalization lead to global environmental problem? Firstly, because of the increase in traveling. Say the increase in the use of traffic vehicles, and then also we are more frequent than before to travel by jet. So that's the reasons why there's an increase in the emission of greenhouse gases. This is the result. And also after globalization, then globally speaking, on the whole, the global population, generally speaking, they are more affluent. Then there's more consumption, and of course, consumption lead to a lot of more consumption lead to a lot of environmental problems. Say the construction of consumption goods will maybe lead to air pollution, lead to water pollution, and also more people can afford to buy a car, to drive by a car, and then they have more, and then this car emits a lot of greenhouse gases. That's why a globalization lead to global environmental problem. International community first of all deal with the natural resources issues. That is in 1960s. They deal with issues not environmental pollutions, but the issues related to environmental protection is so-called the arrangement, allocation, and limited usage of natural resources. Like in 1960s, they deal with overfishing, these issues. Then later, international cooperation in global environmental issues expand to other areas. That is, including some environmental problems like acid rain and also ozone layer depletion. Then, how about the most pressing global environmental problems caused by globalization? Of course, nowadays is climate change. But this problem is a very recent problem. It had not yet been raised until 1970s, 80s, when some international non-governmental organizations like Greenpeace, Greenpeace is among the first international organizations, or we better say international non-governmental organizations, among the first international non-governmental organizations, that is, raise public awareness of this issue, climate change. Before, no one around the world take this issue very seriously. Then, when did governments on the world start formally discussing the issues? In 1992, that's Earth Summit. That is, officially speaking, it's called United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. This is the first time UN held a summit, held a conference, which UN member states, representatives of UN member states, joined the conference to discuss global environmental issues. That's the first time, 1992, held in Rio de Janeiro. In this conference, it's established a so-called UN Framework Convention of Climate Change. That summit, the summit. This Earth Summit in 1992. This Earth Summit was the first time the United Nations formally held a so-called conference to discuss climate change, not environmental issues. UN discussed environmental issues long before that. But this is the first time UN held a summit to discuss climate change. Then, according to this framework, developed nations promised to cut the emission of greenhouse gas back to 1990 level by 2000. Of course, this target was not met. But this is the first time member states of United Nations form a target to cut the emission of greenhouse gas. Then another important progress is that the signed parties, that is states which signed this UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, this framework, this convention, agree to attend an annual conference of the parties. They meet annually. That means they meet annually to consider possible actions and review of adequacy of existing commitment to deal with climate change, this problem. Okay, this is climate change. This is the emission of carbon dioxide. In fact, globally speaking, the emission of carbon dioxide from 1990 to 2011 nearly increased by 30% in these 20 years. Of course, this is a result of globalization. This graph, in fact, clearly shows why globalization provoked global warming. Then what is global warming? Make it simple, is that the average temperature on the world keep on increasing after industrialization. On average, we can say on average each year the global temperature increased by 0.5 degrees Celsius in the past 150 years, nearly 150 years. Of course, the result of global warming, you know what is the result of global warming, is the meltdown of iceberg, and then lead to very extreme climate on the world because of the increase of global temperature. That's why we face in the past it is rare for us to face those so-called super typhoon, but nowadays every year there are super typhoons, just like Sanzhou 2 years ago. Hong Kong, when I was a secondary school student, it is very, very rare for Hong Kong to, and I was a primary and secondary school student, it's very rare for Hong Kong to host typhoon number 10. But in this decade, we have already host typhoon number 10 twice. In the whole 1990s, no. It's just one time. In the whole 2000 is no. But these 2 years, and in the last 4 years, 2 times. Why? This is a result of the global warming, because the weather is warmer, the sea temperature is warmer, then this favor the this sea temperature favors the I want to say not say construction, but basic formation of super typhoon. Okay, who emit greenhouse gas? Of course, the greatest of course, the biggest greenhouse gas or carbon dioxide emission countries are those developed countries. But China, its status is quite ambiguous. China, to some extent, is still a developing country. But for others, they're very developed because, China is very rich. But China's, the greatest, those are China's increase, China's the amount of greenhouse gas emitted by China increased sharply, and China is now the first greenhouse gas. China emits the greatest number of greenhouse gas nowadays. It even emits more greenhouse gas than United States. Then, how international efforts to deal with this global warming, these issues? In the first COP, that is The starting of COP is annual conference of the parties. In the first COP, and in the third COP, the all side parties agree to set a so-called binding emission reduction target. Or developed, but only this is only limited to developed countries. Developed countries, there's no binding emission reduction targets. Developed countries agree to cut the emission by an average 5% against 1990 levels, and we hope that it can achieve this target by 2012. In addition to these targets, those side parties agree to introduce a system of carbon trading, which was designed to assist countries in meeting the targets. That means if my countries emit greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide, lower than a special a target, a designated target, designated by in the Kyoto Protocol, then I can sell that target. That is the remaining target. I can sell the remaining target to a state which emission of greenhouse gas exceeds their designated targets in exchange for money. This is the system of carbon trading. However, Kyoto Protocol later U.S. failed to ratify. Why U.S. failed to ratify is because it is not binding on developing countries, and also U.S. some of the scientists, they consider it's too moderate. It's not that helpful. So because without the U.S. Agreement to ratify this protocol cannot put into function. However, this protocol is still very significant because this is the first time on the world that there's a binding reduction target was proposed. And also it creates the emission trading system. In the past there's no emission trading system, but now that after the Kyoto Protocol, it's introduced this system. Then in the 13th COP out in Bali, it formed a roadmap. It hoped that within 5 years, then the world can come to a conclusion on a new protocol which replaces the Kyoto Protocol, which cannot be put into practice because U.S. did not agree to ratify this protocol. Then in the 13th Bali, this COP, then they all signed parties, all countries participating in this conference agreed to within 5 years sign another protocol. And in this conference, there is, however, 2 years later, they tried the first time to form a new protocol, but it fails because of the disagreement between developing countries. I will talk about what is the content of the disagreements between developing countries on the global warming. Why on the reduction of emission of greenhouse gas? Why there's some conflict between them? The reason for the conflict between developing countries and developed countries. Then in 2015, in the Paris COP, finally, countries agree to sign a new protocol. They agree to peak the greenhouse gas emission as soon as possible, and they hope that to keep the global temperature increase well below 2 degrees Celsius. That is about pre-industrial level. 2 degrees Celsius be above pre-industrial level. Nowadays, we are almost about 3% above the 3 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level, and that's some scientists predict that if the global temperature on average above 5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level, then we may face apocalypse, that is 世界末日. And each want to review progress every 5 years. And also, according to this protocol, the side countries agree to pay 100 billion a year in climate finance for developing countries. Okay, that's the protocol. However, and of course, initially this protocol, all countries on the world think that this protocol, of course, is still quite moderate, but is of course a good first step. But now, this protocol also ended in failure because Donald Trump ordered American to step away from this article, from this protocol. That means now U.S. U.S. of course won in 2015. U.S. signed this protocol, and then in 2015, the U.S. Congress agreed to ratify this protocol. But now, because of Donald Trump, so American now decide to walk away from this article. Now U.S. Is not a state which signed this so-called not protocol, but it's called Paris Agreement. This Paris Agreement. Why is international cooperation so difficult to achieve in handling climate change? Because this is, of course, one of the best reason of one of the best example of so-called collective goods. Collective goods, I think I have already introduced you what is collective goods before, so I do not need to introduce here. But now, in fact, global, so-called the tackling global warming is the best example of collective goods because all countries around the world benefit from it. But all countries around the world have a very high incentive to free ride on the efforts of other countries. So it is because every countries have an intention to free ride. So every countries, certainly not every country, but there's a strong desire for every countries not to follow the instructions from those like Paris Agreement or Kyoto Protocol. This kind of greenhouse gas emission reduction agreements. They have a very strong incentive not to do so, not to free ride on others. And that's the tension between developed and developing countries. Developed countries, in fact, no, this is quite unfair for developing countries to join efforts in reducing the emission of greenhouse gas. That's a few reasons. The first one is because nowadays the developed countries, they have enterprises usually just outsource the production of their products to developing countries, like Nike. There's no factory in American which is now producing Nike. Nike is a shoe, this sports shoe. All factories producing Nike are now located in Southeast Asian countries, including Vietnam, including Indonesia. Then, but the product after it's produced, it shipped back to America, and then American consumers enjoy the product. So it is unfair to developing countries because developing countries, of course, when developing countries is producing some factory products, they are emitting greenhouse gas. But the one who enjoy the production is those consumers from developed countries. If consumers from developed countries can enjoy, but you need the developed countries to suffer to reduce the emission of greenhouse gas. This is unfair to them. In fact, this is what's called outsourcing of emission of greenhouse gases, because nowadays factories in America do not produce enough consumption goods for American to consume, to enjoy. And many factories are now located in developing countries. So it is unfair to count the emission of greenhouse gas to put the blame on developing country, because developing countries is producing something for the consumption of developed people in developed countries. And also developed countries has a historical responsibility for accumulated stock of carbon emitted. They emit a lot of product. They emit a lot of greenhouse gases, which help these countries to build economy well. Enjoy. That's why if you enjoy developed country, you enjoy, then you must cut the emission of greenhouse gas first. However, for developing countries, they consider it's unfair for them to single-handedly cut the emission of greenhouse gas. And also, it's very important for developed countries to play a significant role in cutting emissions. Otherwise, it is impossible for global target to be met. So, but developed countries consider, if developed countries want us to single-handedly to cut the emission of greenhouse gases, is of no use. You should also do so, but developed countries, they consider, okay, you must do so, developed countries, because you bear the historical responsibility. So, because of the conflict between developing countries, it is nearly impossible for them to reach an agreement on how to join efforts to cut the emission of greenhouse gases. Economic obstacles. Very simple, very simple. Why does he mention of greenhouse gas? Because this is a product of economic growth. We consume more luxury products. We consume more consumer goods. We enjoy more consumption goods, and we live a better life. Then the prices, the whole world has to emit a larger number of greenhouse gases. Emission of greenhouse gases is a result of economic development. So, on the other hand, the reduction of emission of greenhouse gases may lead to the economic breakdown. In case that the whole world cannot find other methods to produce electricity more, say, environmental friendly. If the whole world cannot do so, then the reduction of greenhouse gas lead to economic breakdown, lead to the economic recession. And ideological obstacles. We now enjoy a materialist consumerism. We enjoy materialism and we enjoy consumerism, and also our political system, economic system facilitate, agree towards economic growth. For instance, like I would say, like the government. Why the government build an airport? An airport is for people to travel around, to enjoy traveling. Why the government allowed those TV stations and also internet producers to use public areas like the top of the hill and some underground channels to for them to build some networks. Why? The main reason is because the government promotes watching television and promotes the use of smartphone. That's why this whole governmental system and whole economic system favor economic growth. If we go for environmental protection, that means the whole economic and social system and political system must be changed accordingly. Okay, and see you next time.